All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're taking a deep dive, specifically for anyone out there prepping for a policy officer interview.
And we've got some seriously good intel to share.
Yep, we're talking role catchers, career guides, their interview guides, even some AI tricks to help you really nail those responses.
The goal here, not just to get you through the interview,
We're talking about standing out, being memorable.
and ultimately landing that dream job.
So before we jump into the questions themselves, I think it's worth reminding ourselves, what exactly does a policy officer do?
Well, think of them as kind of architects, you know?
Okay, I like that. Architects of what?
Architects of better systems. They're researching, analyzing, then they're designing and crafting policies, and then, of course, they're working to make sure those policies actually get put into action.
Right, making sure those policies actually work in the real world.
Exactly. They're evaluating the impact, they're collaborating with all sorts of stakeholders.
And they're communicating those findings.
Clearly and effectively, yep. And here's the thing. It's not just a government gig.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
You'll find policy officers in think tanks and nonprofits.
Wow, so it's a pretty diverse field then.
Absolutely. It's about making a difference, wherever that might be.
Now let's talk about the AI elephant in the room. So many companies these days use AI to screen candidates.
It's true. And that's where RoleCatcher's AI features can really be a game changer.
Okay, tell me how this works.
Their AI analyzes job descriptions, like down to the nitty-gritty.
So it figures out exactly what employers are looking for.
Exactly. And this lets you tailor your resume or CV.
So you're more likely to get noticed, even by those AI gatekeepers.
Exactly. And if you opt into their Get Discovered feature, employers can actually find you directly.
Oh, wow. So they're searching for your specific skill set.
You got it. It completely changes the game.
Okay, enough prep talk. Let's get to those interview questions. We've got some for every level, entry level, mid-level, even senior level. Let's start with a classic entry-level one. Can you explain your understanding of policy development processes?
All right, so this is your chance to prove you get the policy lifecycle.
But I bet there's more to it than just listing the steps, right?
Research, consultation, drafting, review, implementation, these are all important.
But they need to be more than just words on a page.
Exactly. Think about the real challenges involved in each of those stages.
So, like, give them a glimpse behind the curtain.
Precisely. Let's say you're working on a new environmental policy.
Okay, good example.
The research phase, that could be tricky. Maybe the data on this particular issue is scarce or it's unreliable.
I see, so you'd have to be resourceful.
Exactly. You might have to get creative, rely on expert interviews, forecasting, maybe even some modeling to make those informed decisions.
Now, what kind of follow-up questions could they ask about this?
They might want you to describe a specific policy you worked on.
Oh, okay. To make sure I'm not just talking hypothetically.
Right. Or they might ask how you navigated a certain stage of the process or what you learned from a particularly tricky challenge.
So having a solid example prepared is key.
A story that really showcases your understanding.
And your ability to handle those real-world complexities.
Absolutely.
All right, let's try another one, this time aimed at mid-level candidates. What strategies have you used to ensure policy compliance and implementation?
Okay, this is all about showing them you're proactive. It's not just about making those policies, it's about making sure they actually work.
Right, so you need to demonstrate that you've thought ahead.
Exactly. What systems did you put in place? Did you have regular monitoring, evaluations, compliance checks, maybe even training programs for stakeholders?
So it's about anticipating those potential roadblocks.
Precisely. And being able to clearly articulate how you dealt with them in the past.
What if they ask about specific challenges I faced when implementing a policy?
Perfect. That's your chance to show off your problem-solving skills and how resilient you can be. Having a concrete example ready is a huge plus.
Great advice. Now, I know RoleCatcher's AI can help tailor answers to specific roles. Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. So let's imagine you're applying for a policy role that focuses on environmental sustainability. RoleCatcher's AI can take that job description and pick out all the keywords, phrases, everything related to that specific area.
And then what? What happens with that information?
That's where the magic happens. The AI can suggest specific examples you should include in your answers.
Oh, okay. So it helps me really hit those key points.
Exactly. It can even suggest different ways to phrase things, make your points more impactful. It's almost like having your own interview coach in your pocket.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, let's get back to the questions. Let's try one that's often asked to people with more experience. Can you describe the most challenging policy issue you have dealt with? This one seems pretty intense.
It is. This question is really designed to see how you handle pressure, how you solve problems. It's important to choose an example that's relevant to the position you want and think about the so what of your story.
So what? What do you mean by that?
Well, what were the stakes? What were the consequences if you didn't handle things well? How did you manage different viewpoints? How did your actions lead to a positive outcome? And what did you learn from that whole experience?
So it's about demonstrating that you can handle those tough situations and that you can learn and grow from them.
Exactly. And be ready for those follow-up questions, too. They might want to know more about how you made decisions, how you manage expectations. They might even ask you to speculate about the long-term impact of your choices.
Okay, so this one's all about showing that you can think strategically, anticipate consequences,
Yeah,
and be accountable for your actions.
you got it.
All right, let's keep this going. What's next?
This one's for mid-level candidates and focuses on your analytical skills. Can you explain your experience in policy analysis and review? And for this one, data is your friend.
Okay, so be ready to show how you've used data to identify gaps, potential problems, and areas for improvement.
Exactly. But remember, it's not just about crunching numbers. You need to use those numbers to tell a story.
A story that makes a compelling case for change.
Precisely. Let's say you're reviewing a policy aimed at reducing traffic congestion. You might analyze traffic patterns, public transportation usage, even economic factors to figure out where the existing policy falls short.
And then you'd propose data-driven solutions.
Right, and be ready to share a specific example of how your analysis actually led to a meaningful change in policy. That's what makes a lasting impression.
Got it. So it's about showing that I can connect the dots between the data and real-world action.
Exactly.
All right, let's tackle another question that often pops up in senior-level interviews. Can you describe a time when you had to navigate conflicting policy priorities?
That one seems tricky. It can be. This is designed to assess your leadership, your diplomacy, your ability to make those tough calls. Think about a time where you had to balance competing demands, maybe even make a decision that wasn't popular.
So it's about owning those tough decisions, explaining my reasoning.
Exactly. Highlight how you gathered input, weighed the consequences, and found a solution that ultimately served the greater good. Because even unpopular decisions can be the right ones if you can back them up.
It's about showing that I can handle pressure and make those tough calls, even when there isn't a clear consensus.
Exactly.
Okay, before we jump into more questions, can we talk a bit about how RoleCatcher's AI can give me feedback on my answers? I'm always looking for ways to improve.
That's one of the best things about this tool. Imagine you're practicing your answers on RoleCatcher's platform. The AI can actually analyze what you're saying and give you specific feedback based on the job you're going for.
So it's not just general feedback, it's tailored to the role.
Exactly. It might suggest using certain industry-specific terms, emphasizing some of your achievements more, even adjusting your tone of voice to better match the company culture.
That's incredible. It's like having a personalized coach.
Right at your fingertips.
Okay, back to the interview prep. What's next on our list?
This one is aimed at those with some experience, and it focuses on your ability to adapt. It's, can you describe a time when you had to develop a policy in a new or emerging area? This is your opportunity to show off your research skills and your ability to think outside the box.
So it's all about showing that you can handle the unknown when there's no roadmap to follow.
Right. Think about how you approached your research, who you consulted, whether you had to get information from unconventional sources, and be ready to discuss the challenges, like dealing with limited data, navigating uncharted territory.
So it's about being a pioneer, a trailblazer.
Exactly.
All right, before we dive into more questions, can we pause for a second and talk about the career path of a policy officer? What does that journey typically look like?
Well, there are lots of possibilities. You might begin as an entry-level policy officer, focusing mainly on research and providing support to your senior colleagues.
Okay, so you start by learning the ropes.
Right. As you gain more experience, you might move into a junior policy officer role, taking on more responsibility, maybe even contributing to developing policies.
So you gradually move up, building your expertise along the way.
Precisely. And eventually, you could become a full-fledged policy officer.
Leading your own initiatives.
Exactly. Advising officials, working with all those stakeholders. And of course, for those who are leadership-minded, there's the senior policy officer role.
What does a senior policy officer do?
They're the ones shaping policy across entire sectors, mentoring those junior staff, really leaving their mark on the regulatory landscape.
That's amazing. Okay, back to the questions. What else should our listener be prepared for?
This one focuses on communication and collaboration. It's often asked at the entry level. They might say, Can you explain your experience in stakeholder engagement and management?
So even if you're just starting out, you can still showcase those skills.
Absolutely. Think about projects where you had to work collaboratively, maybe in school, volunteering, even part-time jobs. Talk about how you figured out stakeholder needs, communicated effectively, and worked towards a shared goal.
So it's about proving that you understand different viewpoints and can build those connections.
Exactly. They might even ask you to describe a time you had to manage a challenging stakeholder relationship or resolve a conflict.
Okay, so they're looking for examples of your communication skills and your ability to find common ground.
You got it.
Okay, let's try another one that tends to trip people up. Can you describe a time when you had to communicate policy issues to a non-technical audience? This one seems like it's all about clear and concise communication.
It is. It's about being able to take complex ideas and translate them into language anyone can understand. Think of a time you had to explain a complicated policy to someone who didn't have a background in that area.
So no jargon, right?
Exactly. You might have used analogies, real-world examples, maybe even visuals to get your point across. The key is to focus on the why behind the policy, why it matters to people's lives.
And maybe even be prepared to role play.
That's a good point. They might ask you to explain a policy to them as if they were just a member of the public.
Wow, okay. That's really putting you on the spot. Now, I know we've talked about tailoring your answers to specific roles. Can you give me a concrete example of how RoleCatcher's AI can help me do that?
Of course. Let's say you're going for a role that emphasizes data analysis skills. RoleCatcher's AI can analyze the job description and pinpoint the areas in your answers where you could give more specific examples of your experience with data analysis.
So it's like having a second set of eyes, making sure I'm hitting the right notes.
That's a great way to put it. It might suggest quantifying your achievements, mentioning specific tools you've used, or even restructuring your answer to put more focus on your data-driven approach.
That's incredibly helpful. All right, back to the interview questions. What else should we cover?
This one is typically for senior level positions. Can you explain your experience in policy advocacy and lobbying? Here, you want to demonstrate that you can persuade people, build consensus, really be a champion for your ideas.
So share concrete examples of campaigns you've been involved in.
Exactly. Highlight the strategies you use to build support and influence those decision makers.
And I imagine ethics are pretty important here, right?
Absolutely. Choose examples that show your integrity, your transparency, your commitment to ethical practices. They might ask you about challenges you faced, like dealing with conflicting interests or resistance to your ideas.
So it's about showing that you can be a strong advocate, but also maintain your ethical compass.
Exactly.
All right, earlier we touched on career advancement. What advice would you give someone who wants to climb that ladder and become a senior policy officer?
Continuous learning. It's absolutely essential. The world of policy is always evolving, so stay updated on those emerging trends.
So be a lifelong learner.
Exactly. Things like the role of technology, the focus on data-driven approaches, the ethical considerations around new tech.
Right, so it's not enough to just know the basics. You need to stay ahead of the curve.
Precisely. And don't underestimate networking. Go to those conferences, join professional associations, connect with the thought leaders in your field.
Okay, so networking isn't just about exchanging business cards. It's about building genuine connections.
Absolutely. And those connections can lead to amazing insights, mentorship opportunities, even unexpected career paths.
Great advice. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, let's tackle one more interview question.
All right. This one's a bit of a curveball, and they could ask it at any level. What are some current trends shaping the future of policy work?
This is where they're testing your awareness of the big picture, right?
Yeah. They want to see that you're not just focused on the day-to-day, but you're also thinking about those long-term trends that will impact your work. Think about things like the impact of technology, sustainability, social justice, even the changing demographics of society.
So it's about demonstrating that you're forward-thinking, that you can adapt to those emerging challenges and seize those new opportunities.
Exactly. They might even ask you to pick a specific trend and discuss its potential implications for how policies are developed.
So it's about connecting current events to the future of policy work.
That's a great way to put it.
This has been so helpful. Before we move on to part two, any final thoughts for our listener as they prepare for their interview?
Remember, preparation is key. Think about those specific skills and experiences that align with the role you're going for, and have solid examples ready to go.
And don't forget to use RoleCatcher's AI tools to your advantage.
Absolutely. Their AI can help you tailor your answers, practice those tough questions, get personalized feedback. It's like having a whole team of experts in your corner.
Amazing. We'll dive deeper into those specific questions and give you even more targeted advice in part 2 of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
All right, welcome back to your Policy Officer Interview Deep Dive. In part 1, we laid the groundwork, talked about what policy officers actually do, and how RoleCatcher's AI features can give you a serious edge. Now it's time to roll up our sleeves and really dissect some of those interview questions.
Let's do it. We were talking about those current trends shaping policy work. What are some follow-up questions they might ask to really test my knowledge?
Well, they might want you to go a bit deeper on a specific trend you mentioned. Like they could ask, how do you think AI, the rise of artificial intelligence, is going to change the way policies are developed and implemented?
A good one.
Or maybe, what are some of the ethical things policymakers need to think about when it comes to these new technologies?
So it's not enough to just know the trends. You have to show you've thought about the implications.
Exactly. Now, remember that entry-level question about policy development processes? We talked about going beyond just listing the steps.
Right? Showing you really understand the complexities.
So an interviewer might say, can you give me a specific example of a policy you were involved in developing and walk me through the challenges you faced at each stage?
Okay, so they want a real-world example, not just a hypothetical situation.
Precisely. Have a strong story ready to go, something that highlights your understanding of the process and how you handle those inevitable roadblocks.
It's about showing you can walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Absolutely. And be ready for those follow-ups. Like they might ask, who are the key stakeholders involved? And how did you make sure their voices were heard?
So it's not just about developing the policy in a vacuum. It's about collaboration and making sure everyone has a seat at the table.
Exactly. Now, for those mid-level candidates, remember that question about ensuring policy compliance?
Right, the one about being proactive.
They might ask you something like, what specific metrics did you use to track compliance? And how did you handle any situations where people weren't following the policy?
Okay, so be prepared to talk about the tools and systems you've used.
Right. Whether it's data analysis, regular audits, or getting feedback from stakeholders, they want to see that you have a plan in place.
And that you're not afraid to enforce the rules.
Exactly. And they might even ask you to describe a time when you had to enforce a policy that was facing resistance and how you dealt with that situation.
That's a tough one.
It is, but it's a chance to show your problem-solving skills and your ability to handle those tricky situations.
Now, remember that question about the most challenging policy issue you faced? The one where they're really trying to see how you handle pressure.
Right, that one. Well, they might follow up by asking, what was the outcome of your efforts, and how did you actually measure the effectiveness of your approach?
So it's not just about describing the problem, it's about proving you made a difference.
Precisely. Did you collect data? Did you conduct surveys? Did you get positive feedback from stakeholders? Show them you can quantify your achievements.
That makes your story even more compelling.
Exactly. Now let's talk about that policy analysis and review question. We talked about using data to tell a story.
Right, painting a picture with the numbers.
They might ask, can you give me a specific example where your analysis actually led to a significant policy change?
So this is my chance to shine a light on my analytical skills and their real-world impact.
Exactly. What was the issue you identified? What data did you analyze? What conclusions did you draw? And how did those conclusions translate into real changes that made the policy better?
It's all about showing that connection between analysis and action.
Now, remember that question about navigating conflicting priorities? That one that's all about leadership.
Yeah, the one that makes my palms sweat a little.
They might follow up with, how did you communicate your final decision to everyone involved? And how did you handle any pushback or disagreement?
Okay, so it's not enough to just make the tough call. You have to be able to explain your reasoning and bring people along with you.
Exactly. Did you listen to concerns? Did you address objections in a constructive way? And what did you learn from that experience?
So it's about showing that you can lead through those challenging situations, even when there are different opinions and priorities at play.
Absolutely. Now, that question about developing policies in new and emerging areas, the one about adaptability, they might follow up by asking, how did you stay up to date on the latest developments? And how did you make sure your policy remained relevant?
So they want to see that I'm a proactive learner, that I'm always seeking out new information and adapting to the changing landscape.
Exactly. What journals did you read? What conferences did you attend? Who did you consult with? Show them that you're not afraid to venture into uncharted territory.
And that you can make sound decisions, even when you're dealing with a lot of unknowns.
Now, let's revisit stakeholder engagement. Even at the entry level, they might ask, how would you go about building relationships with stakeholders in a brand new policy area, especially if you're not familiar with their perspectives?
So they're testing my ability to build rapport and establish trust, even with people I haven't worked with before.
Right. Talk about active listening, showing empathy, finding common ground. They might even ask, have you ever worked with someone who had a completely different viewpoint? How did you handle that?
It's about demonstrating those diplomacy
Yeah.
skills, being able to navigate those tricky conversations.
Now, remember that question about communicating policy issues to a non-technical audience?
The one where I have to ditch the jargon and make it relatable.
They might say, can you give me an example of a complex policy you had to explain to someone outside your field? What strategies did you use to make it clear and easy to understand?
Okay, so have a specific story ready to go.
One that shows you can break down complex ideas, use analogies effectively, and really connect with your audience on a human level.
And be ready to talk about the challenges you faced and how you overcame them.
Now, let's go back to that policy advocacy and lobbying question. Remember, this is where you demonstrate those persuasion skills.
The ability to influence those key decision makers.
They might ask, can you describe a time when you had to advocate for a policy that was facing a lot of opposition? What did you do to build support and overcome those challenges?
So it's about showing you can be a strong advocate even when the going gets tough.
Exactly. Did you build coalitions? Did you present compelling arguments? Did you effectively communicate the benefits of your proposal?
It's about showing you can fight for what you believe in while still maintaining your integrity.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, let's talk about how RoleCatcher's AI can help you prepare for these follow-up questions.
Yes, please. This is the part I've been waiting for.
Their platform goes beyond just helping you tailor your initial answers. It can actually simulate a mock interview and throw those curveball follow-up questions your way.
So it's like having a sparring partner, helping me get ready for those unexpected punches.
That's a great way to put it. The AI will analyze your answers, give you feedback on your content, your delivery, even your body language.
Wow, that's amazing.
It can even suggest different ways to phrase things or give you relevant examples to back up your points.
It's like having a whole team of interview coaches right there in your pocket.
Exactly. So, as you prepare for your interview, remember, practice makes perfect. Use RoleCatcher's AI tools to fine-tune those answers, anticipate those tricky follow-up questions, and build the confidence you need to knock it out of the park. We'll wrap things up in part 3, where we'll share some broader career insights and give you those final pieces of advice to help you really stand out from the crowd.
Welcome back to the final part of our Policy Officer Interview Deep Dive. We've talked about those tough questions, how to handle those tricky follow-ups.
We even explored how RoleCatcher's AI can help you refine your answers and practice like you're already in the hot seat.
But there's one more piece of the puzzle.
That's right, your long-term career trajectory.
Because acing the interview, that's just the first step.
Exactly. It's about thinking bigger, what opportunities are out there, how to set yourself up for success in this field.
Okay, so let's map this out. We talked about the career path earlier, but I'd love to dig a little deeper. What are some concrete steps I can take to move from that entry-level position to a more senior role?
Be proactive. Be intentional about your growth. Look for those chances to expand your skill set.
So taking on challenging projects, volunteering for new things.
Exactly. Maybe even going for additional certifications or training programs. Make it clear to your superiors that you're hungry to learn, to grow.
So don't just wait for opportunities to come to you.
Right. Go after them. Express interest in specific policy areas. Be willing to step outside your comfort zone.
Now, what about continuous learning? What areas should aspiring policy officers really focus on?
Well, the policy landscape is constantly changing, right? So adaptability is key. Stay informed about those emerging trends.
Like what? Give me some examples.
The role of technology in policymaking, the focus on data-driven approaches, the ethical considerations around new technologies.
So it's not just about mastering the basics.
No, you got to stay ahead of the curve. Anticipate those future challenges.
How we talked about networking.
Right? Don't underestimate that. Go to conferences, join those professional organizations, connect with those thought leaders online.
Okay, so networking is crucial in this field.
It really is. Those connections can open doors, provide valuable insights, maybe even lead to mentorship opportunities.
And sometimes even open doors to those unexpected career paths.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about those less tangible qualities that can really make you stand out.
Okay, those soft skills, communication, critical thinking.
Teamwork. Those are the things that can truly make a difference.
And those aren't always things you can learn in a classroom.
Right. So look for opportunities to develop those skills. Maybe lead a project, present your research at a conference, even just facilitate a team meeting.
So take initiative, showcase those skills, prove you're ready for those bigger challenges.
Exactly.
Any other advice for someone who's really aiming for those senior leadership roles?
Never stop learning, never stop growing, never stop challenging yourself. The world of policy is complex, it's constantly evolving, and those who thrive are the ones who can embrace that change.
With curiosity, resilience, and a real passion for making a positive impact.
Well said.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've covered so much ground.
We have, from those basic interview questions to those tricky follow-ups to mapping out your career path, even uncovering those essential soft skills.
So as we wrap up, any final words of wisdom for our listener as they embark on this exciting journey?
Remember this, a policy officer's work goes way beyond just sitting at a desk. You have the power to shape policies that affect communities, industries, maybe even entire nations. So approach this role with purpose, with integrity, and a real commitment to serving the greater good.
That's inspiring. And don't forget, RoleCatcher's got your back every step of the way.
Absolutely. Use their AI tools. Practice those tough questions. Build that confidence. We know you're going to do great.
That's it for our Policy Officer Deep Dive. Good luck out there, everyone, and we'll see you next time.